Hey, everybody, and welcome to our summit recap. We just wanted to welcome everybody. We're really glad to have everyone who participated, both the speakers and the audience members who showed up and said what they needed to say, ask questions to not just dig into these conversations, but really forward them into the future. So thanks again for all those folks who showed up from the Tucson area and beyond, design professionals, our university partners, digging into these intersectional issues of mobility, affordable housing, and streets for all. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Ben Elias. I work for the city of Tucson in the Department of Transportation and Mobility. I'm a recent addition to the planning division here, and I wanted to introduce, I have the special occasion to introduce my dad, Albert Elias, who's a professional planner by trade and now retired from the city of Tucson after serving 36 plus years and holding multiple titles through that time in transportation, planning, public housing, and finally leaving the city as an assistant city manager. So if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more and give folks some background, then we can kick off any recap that we had through the session.
Oh, well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate the intro, and I don't really have much to add other than, even though I am supposed to be retired, I still care very much about these issues that we've been talking about today. So for me, listening to this and kind of thinking about it has been very inspirational, energizing, and really pushing myself to think about what I need to do in order to be part of the solution and to really help Tucson achieve all the things we're talking about today. So I'll just say that.
And you haven't necessarily taken it easy after your retirement. So what have you been spending your time with in the last couple of months here?
Well, I spend my time with my your son, Ben, and watching him a couple days a week with my wife. And we're also working on renovating an old building that our family has owned since the 20s. And then I'm also a member of Living Streets Alliance board. But really, I'm more interested in talking about some of the things I heard today because, as I said, I think there was some great things said today, some great opportunities for us as a community to continue to move forward in some really critical issues.
And was there anything that you wanted to start off? I know I wrote down a lot of quotes and important points. Did you have anything that really made an impact on you?
Well, there were quite a few things, but let me just say this kind of to start the discussion. I think there was something that was really important that came out of pretty much everybody who spoke today. And that's the idea that these are complex issues. People talked about the intersectionality, but the real bottom line is we're going to make better decisions as a community if everybody can participate in the discussion and everybody can be at the table, and especially thinking about who's not at the table, who has been marginalized in the past, who is not perhaps ready or able to participate for whatever the reason. I think that's a very important theme that I heard in pretty much every session this morning, including the Mayor Romero. I thought she was right on when she talked about access and equity really being our keys to prosperity and sustainability as a community. And I think she really recognizes that if we don't have a way to have these important conversations and make sure that everybody has a chance to participate And if we don't make that a priority, then we're gonna make and repeat some of the mistakes in the past. And of course, we don't want to do that. So that was one of the key things I thought she said, and it really was built on some of what Dr. Garcia said about asset-based community development. I know I believe very much in that, and I love the little framework that she shared about how asset-based community development works and the different aspects of it. I thought that was a great primer in that. And while I might have some familiarity with that, I think it's very important for the listeners of today's sessions to really embrace that idea that the community is not just one person, and it's not just one neighborhood. It's all of these different groups, individuals, institutions, the physical assets, the local economy, our culture. Those are all part of our community, and we need to take all of that into consideration if we're going to make good decisions.
Yeah, I think that note about community is really interesting because it's so easy to use the word community, but it has so much wrapped into it. And so, we don't want to shy away from that, but we also need to be really intentional about how we're working and how our community outreach is organized and who we're bringing to the table. I think Mayor Romero often brings up that point that her family woke up that intention in her to be involved. And we have to realize when maybe our community is not engaged in a certain way. If they haven't had anybody around them that's engaged politically or socially or with their small businesses or with a neighborhood plan or a housing project that's going in near them, those are all ways to be involved and engaged with the greater community. And we don't, I think we need to give folks the opportunity and really think creatively about different avenues to be engaged and to be talking with all these folks from different walks of life. Because these big plans and big opportunities moving forward that we need to take care of moving forward really has to have buy-in from everybody, as many people who can be involved.
Yeah. So in that first opening remarks, there were two things that really stuck with me. One was something that Dr. Garcia said, and that it's important to have a dream. And what are you going to do to make a difference? And, it's easy. I know it's easy for me to be more passive, but I think we all need to find a way to embrace our dream and to work on our dream every day and think about what are we going to do to make that happen. And hey, I understand how hard it is. We have families, we have children who have needs, we have our work that's pressing on us, or our business, we're trying to make payroll on our business. There's a million distractions in life. But at the end of the day, if we don't have a pretty clear idea of what we're aspiring for, both individually and as a community, then we're just not going to be successful. So I really liked what Dr. Garcia said. The other thing, of course, that Mayor Romero has said before is that elections have consequences. And every policy, whether it's transit or healthcare or land use, they are all part of the puzzle and they all relate together. They're not just decisions that are made individually. So anyway, I just want to conclude by saying, I think we're, as a community, we have leadership like Mayor Romero, like our mayor and council, like our city manager and transportation director, who are in tune to this idea that you have to make all these decisions, even though they may be made incrementally, they have to fit together and fit into a puzzle, and we only make good decisions when we listen to what people say. So that was kind of the big thing I took home from that opening session.
Yeah, and just personally, I mean, I know your professional training and experience was originally in transportation planning, but you've held a couple different roles over the years, and I wanted to quickly ask you about how your time in housing has shifted or maybe affected your perspective on all these issues, not just transportation and mobility, not just housing, but like the big picture.
Well, I think a couple of the speakers talked about how critical housing is. And I think in this era that we're in right now, where housing affordability is such a problem, we're seeing some impacts of the housing market that speak to gentrification and displacement. We have a history of that happening in our community. I think all of those things help me realize that we need to pay just as much attention to housing as we do to our transportation needs, and also to the economic well-being of our community. You know, we need to have a community where everybody can thrive. And if you don't have a stable housing situation, that's something we need to pay attention to. So for me, it just underscored how critical housing needs were. And, you know, our panel of experts in the housing in that last section were very, they were very eloquent about how that ties back to transit, how that ties back to what happens in the market. So I was very pleased to hear that there was a clear, our housing needs of the community and our overall quality of life.
Yeah, I was really struck by a few things that Chris O'Clair said. First, focusing on community and culture, and you know, that they didn't refer to it as transit-oriented development, but instead transit-oriented communities, because again, thinking that it's not, if we're going to build something, it's not just a building that's mixed use by a transit line. It's a place where people live and move and care about where they're at. And at the same time, thinking really importantly and intentionally about the folks that already reside there, and how that affects everybody. I think that whole idea of looking at the region as a whole and making big plans to move things forward and build a system where everybody can afford to do what they need to do, live, work, play, you know, get to work, get to school, move the kids around. And people don't always travel the same way. They don't always travel at the same time. And those are all really important things to keep in mind when building systems that are more resilient, because I think that's the only way we can really go moving forward.
Yeah, you're right, Ben. In fact, in that last session, I think Selena Barajas made a great point about the need for being transparent and holding all the stakeholders to be accountable and to be authentic with people, because the truth of the matter is our community is dynamic and it continues to change every single day. And until we really understand all the nuances of the interconnection between these issues, it's going to be difficult to deal with them. You know, Shane Phillips mentioned that when he talked about there is no one silver bullet for housing and how housing policy interacts in a lot of different ways. And I think he had his 3S approach, supply, stability, and subsidy, as his way of organizing it. But the bottom line, again, comes back to what do people feel really matters to them? What makes their community safe? What makes it more inviting? What makes them feel like they want to put down roots, that they want to invest and feel really safe in a place. I mean, those are the things that drive decision making. Those are the things that drive how we feel about our vision for a community. So I think being able to listen to what that means for our community is really important, and not get too hung up on one piece of land or one developer or one development, because all of this is interconnected. And at the end, we have a chance as community to push the needle with respect to how our elected officials and other important decision makers deal with these things. And that's where this idea of being active and being clear about what you want is worth taking a few minutes to think about. And more importantly, it's worth spending your time to get involved and to think about how to implement your ideas and your vision for what makes your community the best place it can be.
Yeah, and I think additionally, the speakers on that first session really had some interesting things to say about the way that we organize ourselves and the way that we move efforts forward, that we really need to create. Nicole Irosilardo said we need performance measures, we need to ask the community what they need and trust them where they feel safe, where they want to go, what they do and do not want, really learn from the community. And then once we know what they need, you got to fund it. You got to find a way to do it, and do it in a way that might be resilient, but it's really that I think Rebecca Sanders said, we need to value people's perceptions as much as we value the hard data, because both can influence our decisions, but they can't be cast aside. What people are telling us are things we really need to listen to and adapt our strategies to address those.
Yeah, I thought that session was great from the perspective of the speakers really focusing in on how we have to make policy changes, and they need to be responsive to people's individual perceptions of safety and walkability and bikeability and that kind of thing, and really being comfortable equally in all fronts, you know, whether you're walking or biking, or even if you're in your home, you know. So I like the way they talked about that. And one of the things that I think it was Rebecca who mentioned, that we kind of need to shift the way we talk about these things so that we are honest with people about our systems and what causes these outcomes. You know, that 94% of crashes are due to human error. And well, is that all on the individual who was the operator or who made a choice? No, it's also about the systems. And those systems were created oftentimes without input from the community, without forethought about how that would affect people's lives. So I like that idea that the solutions that we work toward now and in the future have to really be based on our stories and the lives of real people and how they are impacted by these systems. So I thought that was a really important part of that particular session.
Yeah, and I think the other note is that I think anecdotally, I've heard a lot from community members where they might be really quick to say, hey, this doesn't work for me. And it can be something as simple as pavement. You know, the asphalt that I travel over is not smooth and it needs to be fixed. And I think a really high priority right behind it is sidewalks. Either sidewalks that are accessible or contiguous or well-lit. Street lighting is another concern that some of our panelists brought up, and those are all really key essential things that we need to take a look at because it's just the way that people get around and can feel safe and comfortable, and utilize those networks that are already in place, but might need a little love.
Yeah, one of the things that I took away was that those graphics that showed that the accidents, the hottest part of the community, and the low-income areas all overlap each other. And I think that speaks really powerfully to how we have some areas of our community that have been disinvested in, both by government and by the private sector, and that's not right. And we have an opportunity to change that. And I think the whole idea of, I think someone mentioned it in that session, I don't remember who, about the gravel on the bike boulevard. You know, that's an issue if the streets aren't swept in certain neighborhoods because the perception is that neighborhood doesn't care or doesn't bike, which is both drastically wrong. That's something that we need to change, and that can change very easily. So I thought that was a really great session from the perspective of what we can do to make changes that will really make a difference. And some of them are small and some of them are big. I love the whole Tucson Cool Corridor project too. That was wonderful. I think Nicole talked about that. So I thought that was a very informative session, especially with regard to actionable items that can be dealt with today. And that was really exciting and informative.
Yeah, and I just wanted to double back to questions. I don't think we had any in the chat right now, but I do want to encourage people, if they have a last minute question that maybe wasn't answered by one of our panelists, but we want to bring it up in front of the group, feel free to put those in the chat now. Do you think there are any last minute impressions that you want to bring to the table as far as the valuable things that we got to hear and reflect on during these summit panels?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that really made me feel like we're moving in the right direction was the comments that we heard from the Tucson Norte Sur ambassadors during the cafecito. I think all of them really get it. And that made me feel like we are on the track to make some better decisions. And I think this idea that we can hear the voices in the community and see how they will impact our decisions is really very powerful and energizing and makes me optimistic about the future. You know, I'm the first one to admit that we haven't done all the right things in the past, but I don't want to dwell on the past. I think you learn from the past. I want to think about the future, because that's where the opportunity lies. That's where we can really implement some of the learning that we've had. And I think during the cafecito, I know several of them talked about how we can make our failures into successes, and how we can, if we trust people and we listen to people. So that made me feel like we were on the right track there. So that was one of the highlights for me.
Yeah, I think what Dee Toro said, I want to be informed, I want to be involved because this place is my center. And I think that's really impactful. I think anybody that spent a little bit of time here can realize how special this place is and how special its people are and its culture. And I think that drawing in that energy and trying to harness that excitement and a feeling of hopefulness is something that'll really serve us well in the future, and amplify voices that may not have had a seat at the table a generation prior, to really involve them in our planning efforts and our engagement and cultivate those folks as new leadership for everything going forward.
Right. I totally agree with what you said. And it was wonderful to me to watch Kristen from BICUS and Vanessa from Fugo really talking about how they are expressing their desire to make change at the micro level, making biking affordable, making people think about how to take care of their bikes, having people think about how to reuse equipment. Those are all really important, I think. And I'm so glad that our community is blessed with something like BICUS. And same thing with Vanessa. I've been on that ride that she leads, and it is a feeling of family. And it is that opportunity to experience one another on a bike that really can't be replicated. We can talk about it all afternoon, but once you experience it, it's transformational. So I don't know, I just thought that both Kristen and Vanessa had some great things to share with us during that session.
All right, we have one more question and then we have to wrap it up here. The question was actually directed at you. Do you have any thoughts as a public servant who's now retired on anything that we can do within a system, an organization like the City of Tucson, to do any and all of the things that we mentioned today?
Wow, that's great. Well, that's a good question. And I have two quick answers. First, don't be afraid to try something different. I think as city officials, city employees, often our system has created an atmosphere where we're afraid to make a mistake because oftentimes we're considered subject matter experts, and no expert wants to fail at anything. In fact, you want to look good. So I would tell your colleagues, Ben, don't be afraid to try something different. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Let's just say you do make a mistake and you try something that's a big failure. You know what you do? You pick yourself off the ground, you dust yourself off, you think about what you did wrong, and you try something else. That is a mentality that I would recommend. And then the other thing is that we need to trust the community. We need to trust that even though you're trained as an expert, even though you have experiences that community members may not have, they are the ones who we work for. And it's civil servants and city employees' responsibility to be willing to listen carefully and thoroughly and to be open and clear with people and tell them the truth. And I think if we can do those two things, that'll help the city as an organization, it'll help the community as a whole.
All right, well, thanks so much for your response. I want to thank everybody who's attended. Thank you so much for bringing what you do to the table. I wanted to thank our sponsors as well, ACEC and also NHTSA for providing us the capability to put this on and bring Dr. Avis Garcia to be our keynote speaker. Thanks again, and I encourage you all to stay involved and stay engaged. Thank you.